Alright, in this tutorial I'm going to show you how you can create something like this, which is a very basic cup filled with rigid body spheres that's being poured out onto a surface. Now let's go ahead and get started. Come up here to File, and then New and General. Alright, I am using Blender 2.82. Now, I'm not going to teach you specifically, or the intent of this isn't to teach you specifically how to create a cup with rigid body spheres in it and then have it dump it out. It's more along the lines to teach you the process. That way you can adapt that information to something else. Alright, now, I don't need the default cube to start, so if you got the default cube, go ahead and delete it. And one more thing, I'm going to go ahead and press 1 to go into front side view, and then press 5 to go into orthographic view. Now, starting in Blender 2.8, there is something in the preferences called, where is it? Auto perspective. If you have this turned on, you don't exactly switch between perspective and orthographic view by pressing 5 on the number pad. It does it automatically, but I don't like it when it does it automatically. I like having control of it, so keep that in mind. Alright, now we're going to start off by modeling the cup, and it's just going to be a very basic cup. Now, there's an easy way you can do this by making using a cylinder, but we're going to start off with a circle because I want to show you the modeling process. So click Add, Mesh, and then Circle. Now, if you look at that, it's just basically a circle. Now, with that selected, press Tab to go into Edit mode, and then press the letter F to fill. And it basically just created a face. Now, go back to 1. I'm in orthographic view, and then I'm going to extrude this up. So press E for extrude, and then just drag it up just a little bit. And then press S for scale, and then just make it just a little bit bigger. And then E for extrude, and then bring it up to about here. And then press I for inset and bring it to about there. Now go ahead and put this in a wireframe by clicking on this, or you can always press the letter Z to bring up this menu. Now I'm going back to front side view, and then press E for extrude, and then just bring us down to about there. And as you can see, that's our cup. Very basic cup. I'm not going to do a whole lot to it. Just leave it like that because I'm just teaching you the basic process. Press Tab to exit edit mode. Now, let's create the actual rigid body objects that are going to go in this cup. So let's add a sphere. Add, Mesh, and then a UV sphere. Now that's obviously way too big. So let's press 7 to go on top side view. And here we will need to make sure it's an orthographic view. Because see, here's the difference. If you're looking at it in perspective view, it's sort of still 3D. But if you're in orthographic view, you're kind of viewing it in 2 dimensions, if that makes any sense. Now, we need to select this sphere and then make it smaller. But we can't really see the edges of the cup, so let's go ahead and put this in wireframe. Alright, and then now we can clearly see the inner wall of the cup. Now I'm going to scale this sphere down to about that size. Just eyeball it, doesn't have to be perfect. Now, since this sphere is going to be a rigid body object, we need to apply the scale to it. That way it doesn't glitch, because it will glitch when messing with rigid bodies if the scale is not applied. And you can always tell if the scale is not applied, because if the scale is applied on scale right here, it's going to be 1, 1, 1, regardless of how big this object is. So if we press Control A, it brings up this menu, and then we choose scale. Now all these went to 1. Alright, now what we want to do, we want to make this a rigid body object. So with the sphere selected, click on the Physics Properties tab, click on Rigid Body, and we want this rigid body to be basically an active object. We want gravity to pull on that object. So we want to make sure this shows active. And then since it's a sphere, we want to go ahead and put this on sphere. That way it will calculate quicker, because it can calculate the physics of a sphere quicker than an odd shaped object, because it's just calculating the barrier from the center, from the point of origin. Whereas if it's on like Convex Hole, it's like there's shrink wrapped around it, and it's calculating the position of that shrink wrap. And if it's on mesh, it's actually calculating the position of each individual face. So if it's on mesh, it's going to take a long time to calculate. So in this case, since these are spheres, we definitely want this on sphere. Now the weight really doesn't matter in this example. Now surface response, do we want these balls to have any bounce to them at all? Let's go ahead and give it a little bit of bounce. Change this to 0.1. If we don't want any bounce, put it on 0. If we want it to, basically what I mean by that is whenever that sphere falls onto another surface, do we want it to bounce? If we don't want it to bounce at all, have it set to 0. If we want it to bounce forever, essentially, put it on 1. And you kind of understand that this is like 10% bounce. So if it falls 1 meter, it's going to bounce back up 0.1 meter. That's basically how that works. All right. Now, we need to duplicate these spheres. So I'm going to press G for grab, and then X for the x-axis, and then just bring this over, and just make sure you're not intersecting the edge of the cup. And then press Shift D to duplicate, and then X for the x-axis, and then just bring that to about there. And that, you can see there's no intersections, because you do not want to start a physics simulation with intersections. Things will go nuts. Now, since we duplicated that and moved it on the x-axis, we can press Shift R, and it will duplicate the last process. And we'll just create that many going across. And then let's press B for box select and select those. And then press Shift D and duplicate them. Press Shift D again and duplicate them. Now we need to copy more, not a whole row, but part of the row. So press B for box select, and then just select those. Press Shift D, bring that to about right there. Do the same thing on the other side. Shift D, drag it to about there. And then now just select 3 of them. 1, Shift select, Shift D, bring it to about there, and then do the same thing. Shift D to duplicate, and then bring it to about there. Alright, that's basically one layer. Now let's go ahead and select all of these spheres. So press the letter C to bring up this circle, and then just left click or hold the left mouse button down while you select all of these, And if you accidentally select a cup, no big deal. Alright. Now, since we did select a cup, go ahead and put this on solid view, and then press shift right click on the cup to deselect it. Alright, now go back into wireframe, press 1 to go into front side view, and as you can see, all these spheres are intersecting the bottom of the cup. So with just the sphere selected, press G for grab, and then Z for the Z axis, and then just bring it up above the bottom of the cup, which the bottom of the inside of the cup, which is right here. Alright, now let's go ahead and duplicate these spheres. Shift D and then Z for the Z axis, and then bring it up till it's just above the rest of them. And again, make sure there's no intersections. And then press Shift R until you fill your cup up. Simple enough, right? Alright, now select the cup, and we need to make this cup a rigid body object. Now this cup, we can't really treat it like a cylinder, because like if we click on the rigid body, and we have options here, Convex Hole, we definitely don't want to treat it like a box because it's round. We can't treat it like a sphere because it's the shape of a cylinder. So can we use cylinder? No. Because if we put this on cylinder, besides the fact that the origin is way down here, I mean, that really doesn't matter. We can go ahead and come up here to set origin to geometry to fix that issue. But it's treating the top of this like it's sealed, because it's only calculating a cylinder shape. But this cup is cylindrical, but it's also hollow. So what about Convex Hole? Now Convex Hole, like I said before, that's like having a shrink wrap wrapped around it. So essentially it's going to calculate it almost identical to cylinder. So what we need a setting that will tell it to calculate every single face position. So we need to put this on mesh. And anytime you're dealing with something that's hollow on the inside or has a recess like a cup would, where rigid body objects could be inside of it, you will have to use mesh. Alright, now we want this cup to be animated. So we also need to keep this on active, but tick animated. And what that basically means is the cup will move, but according to keyframes instead. Alright, now let's go ahead and press 1 to go into front side view. Now let's go ahead and add a floor. So press add, mesh, and then plane. And you can see you got your plane down here, and then just scale this up and just make it kind of yay big. It doesn't have to be perfect. Alright, now look over here, scale 16, 16, 16. We need all these to be 1, so press Control A to bring up that and choose apply scale. Now they're showing 1, it will not glitch. Alright, now we need to apply a rigid body attribute to this floor. That way, whenever the spheres hit the floor, the rigid body engine knows that the spheres are actually supposed to impact the floor. Alright, so with the floor selected, click rigid body. Now we do not want this floor to fall, we want it to stay static. So change it from active to passive. And that will basically remove gravity from affecting the floor. And it also, it basically will just make the floor stay perfectly still. It will be passive. Alright. Now, let's go ahead and animate this cup. So select this cup. And before we go further, come over here click on this tab, which is the Scene Properties tab, and then turn off Rigid Body World. And the reason why we're doing that is because when we skip ahead to another frame, sometimes it will glitch because these rigid bodies that are active in here will try to catch up. Now, it's not that big of a problem with 2.8 and later versions of Blender, but with the older versions of Blender, it got really glitchy, and it's just a habit I've gotten into. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off Rigid Body World, essentially, just temporarily. That way I can animate my cup. Alright, the cup's going to start out basically on the floor. I'm going to go ahead and put this in solid view so we can see it better. Alright, now I'm going to go ahead and add a keyframe for the location and rotation of this cup. I press the letter I to bring up this menu and choose location, rotation. Now jump ahead to, let's say, frame 50, and then press G for grab, and then Z for the Z axis, and move this cup to about right there. And then press R for rotate, and then just rotate it to about right there. Now press I to bring up this menu, choose location, rotation. Now go over to frame 100, and then once again with this cup selected, press R for rotate, and then rotate it to about there, and then press I for location, rotation. Now if I go back to frame 1 and press play, you see the cup go up and then rotate and pour out. Now, of course, the rigid body spheres have not moved because rigid body world is temporarily turned off. Alright, now before we calculate this is a good time to actually save the project. File, save it somewhere, give it a name. I'm just going to call it Untitled because I'm that kind of lazy right now. Alright, now come back over here to Rigid Body World, open up this tab, and then right here is steps per a second. This is how many calculations it will make for every single object within a 1 second time period. Now the 1 second time period is based off of the number of frames and the number of frames per second. So right now, the frame rate. So right now, it's set to 30 frames per second. So with this set to 60, essentially, there's one sub-step, I guess you could say. Now if I turn this up to 120, then there are 3 sub-steps, which means basically it's calculating the location of everything 4 times for every single frame. Generally speaking, you want this to be at least 120. Usually I put it on 240, but sometimes if you go too high, it will get glitchy also. But usually between 120 and 240 is about right for 30 frames a second. Now, it kind of depends on what the frame rate you have set here is, because you definitely want a multiple of this. It calculates it smoother. It's hard to explain without actually bringing up a whole bunch of different examples, but essentially make this a multiple of your frame rate. Usually 3, 4, or 5 times as high. Alright, but generally speaking, between 120 and 240 steps per second is fine. Now, solver iterations, that's going to make virtually no difference in a simulation like this. That comes in handy, especially when you're using rigid body constraints, because it will help make the constraints less stretchable or less prone to glitching if you turn that up. I think you can turn that up to, I think it's 1,000 is the highest it can be set to. Let me see. Yeah, 1,000 is highest it can be set to. But generally speaking, most of the time in almost every rigid body simulation, you can pretty much leave that alone. Unless you're dealing with really heavy objects, then maybe you need to turn it up a little bit. But generally, yeah, you're fine. Leave it at 10. Now you have your cache settings. And we can probably just go ahead and click bake at this point. Now before we do that, let's go ahead and press save one more time. That way, if it crashes, we can just open it right back up. So press bake, and you can see it's baking quick, even at 240 steps per second. Now, if I press play, the objects go up with the cup and then pour out. Simple enough, right? But I hope I've done this in such a way where the rigid body system was explained in such a way where you can adapt what you learned, if you learned anything, to other things. But anyway, thanks for watching, and of course now all you need to do is add a material to this stuff. Of course, I didn't think about something. If you do need to add a material to all these spheres, right now there is no material applied to any of them, so you could always, apply it to them individually, or you could do something like this, which go to the end, and then let me see, I could hide this cup and go ahead and hide the floor, select one of them, give it a material, and then go on the top side view, and then press B for box select to select all of them, and then press Control L and then choose materials, and then essentially I just applied the materials from that one to the rest of them. Say I got 351 balls. Alright, and then you could assign it a material, and as you can see, all of them have that material now. But anyway, I hope that helped you out, and I guess that's it. Later, people.